go through some emerging scientific findings that are coming out as it pertains to COVID-19, its treatment, what they're finding, many other things about it. All right. I do not intend or will pretend that I will be exhaustive this evening. Rather, it's just to whet your tongue and whet your appetite so that you can get into the groove of following the science. Today, we live in a world where information is not choked up as one time. In the time of our parents, maybe, they didn't have free access to information as we did today. Most of it was in printed form and only available to a certain few who were in a specialized field. Now, today, information is widely disseminated. Most information can be found on the internet. Now, the internet is a place where there's good and there's bad. Simply, the internet is just a medium. And on the internet, you have fantastic information. On the internet, you also have nonsense, rubbish, things that aren't true. And so you now have to sift through that so you can get your information from credible sources. And when we come to a situation as what we're in now, we're looking at sources that were even credible prior to COVID-19, not newly established sources. So we can say we've always trusted this source. That's what that source says. And in any case, we all come to this situation having our personal biases. We cannot pretend that we do not all have our personal biases. Tonight will not be to convince anyone differently from how they are already convinced. Tonight will be so more for information and for looking at the science, which the presenter personally believes is not really being forecasted. Most persons that I had the chance to speak with them are unaware of these things, even though they are easily accessible. Some persons know, some persons don't know. And there's a saying, what you know can't hurt you, but and ignorance is bliss. But, you know, I'm a man who is informed by the Bible. You don't have to be if that's your thing tonight. I'm not forcing that on you, but I'm saying I'm a man who's informed, and the Bible says that my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. So, you know, ignorance is not bliss anymore. I mean, what you know, what you don't know can actually harm you. So tonight is just to give people information so that they can be informed of their decision. We see information coming out of certain sources, but you would have to actually be blind to not understand and see that only certain information is actually given from certain sources. All right, so that's the intention of tonight. I want to also make the statement that the science is emerging. No one can say, hey, listen, this is the authority on the science, this is it. The very virus is called the novel coronavirus. Come on. So if it is novel, then any treatment developed and anything that we're understanding about it will even be more novel. I mean, so the science is emerging. And as the science emerges, we want to catch that and see if it matches with what we already believe. If it doesn't, well, we change our belief, of course. Especially if the science can be ratified that what was done was actually a good scientific method. All right, so the science will match our worldview. I know that some of us, we want it to match, but we also want to be very objective in what we're saying and follow the science. Another thing is that policies do not stand in a vacuum. When policies are developed, whether on an organizational level or even governmental level, they are normally standing on the foundation of something. And in this instance, policies are being developed that claim to stand upon the foundation of science. And that is how a good practice would be developed. We develop policies based on science. So that's what tonight is all about, looking at the science so that you yourself can be informed. Just some things that you to bear in mind. You may send your email if you desire to have these studies that I'm going to go through. You can send them in the chat so that I'll see them, I'll save the emails and disseminate them to you as well. If you have questions or comments while I'm going through, please feel free to use up the chat. If I have the time and the space, I'll answer them right away. If I do not, I'll let you know that I'll get back to you where that is concerned. All right, so that's about it for housekeeping, and let's begin. All right. So we first want to feature a study which was done early on out into the whole, not really earlier this year, I should say, into this whole pandemic. And it is, I hope you're seeing it on the screen. And I'll bring it up a little bit. And this is an original research called Preventing Chronic Diseases, a Public Health Research. And it was volume 18, E66, July 2021. So this one is a very large data set, meaning it's not 1,000 persons. This is actually over 1 million persons were in this data set, as we'll see. 4,899,000 persons, all right, were in this data set. But among that 4,540,667 adults were hospitalized with COVID-19 between a year, and that year was March 20 to March 2021. So what they did is that they followed these people who came down with COVID-19 and were hospitalized. And then from that, they did this study that we all have here. Here are some of the names of the doctors, PhDs, and all these people who participated. And actually, this is a CDC study. If you look right here, you have the CDC banner. So what I'm presenting to you is not something that I'm cooking up. This is actually something that comes out of the CDC. And even though the CDC banner is there, they make the statement that, you know, it's not necessarily their opinion. But we understand that is just normal to say. And actually, if you look to the left-hand side of your screen, you'll also see that the study is peer-reviewed. So what it means is that other scientists and doctors have also looked at it and have agreed. So when studies come out, they come out first in a preprint. And if they pass that stage, time given, they are eventually peer-reviewed. Some of them go straight into a medical journal, because journals operate differently. All right, so let's get into this one. All right, and just want to go here to what it said. Just looking at the introduction, it says severe COVID-19 in adults has been linked to underlying medical conditions. We all know that by now. We all know that underlying medical conditions can either increase your chances or lessen your chances of survival. Okay, I think I made a mistake there and stopped sharing the screen. I want to start again. And then I want to go back to here. Start video, then I want to go back to here. Great. So we all know about underlying medical conditions. So what about underlying medical conditions? We start here this evening, and we're going to looking at the results. Now, this is a long study. It would be unfair to the viewers for me to go through this with a fine-teeth comb. So what I'm really doing is just looking at the major things that people can readily digest, especially if you're not scientifically inclined. You can know this stuff, and you can have it for yourself, and you can understand it. So let's look at the results there. I hope it is clear on your screen. If not, I'll just bring it up a little bit. I've already gone through these and I've put highlights on some portions. So in the results, it says among 4,899,447 adults hospitalized, 540,667, which is 11%, were patients with COVID-19, okay? So let's look at some data now. It said of whom 94.9% had at least one underlying medical condition. So that's very significant. And I hope that relieves you a little bit that 94.9 had at least one underlying medical condition. All right, so especially if you are somebody who won't have any of these that I'm saying, you're not in the clear yet, but it's all, let's just call it 95% of persons who end up in the hospital already had something going on with them. You know, they had comorbidities. All right, so now let's look at them. Among these were like essential hypertension, all right, disorders of lipid metabolism, you know, like high cholesterol and so on, and obesity. These were the most common. All right, so I've listed three already. Now, the strongest risk factors for death were obesity, anxiety, and fear-related disorders. Now, I had that in green because that was actually remarkable to understand that anxiety and fear-related disorders were actually the second highest risk factor for death. And let me continue, I'll come back to that. And diabetes with complication, as well as a total number of conditions with ARRs of death ranging from 1.3 for patients of one condition to 3.82 for patients to more than 10 conditions. So, of course, what it is saying is that the higher your conditions or the more combinations, you have persons who have high blood pressure, diabetes, and, all these things coming together. Your risk of death based on what they found, and hospitalization and death actually went up. All right. But I want to come back to anxiety and fear related disorders a little bit and talk about that. As I said earlier on, I'm a man that's informed by the Bible. If you're not, this is not my way of forcing it on you, but I want you to, it's just my view and I'm sharing it here. 2 Timothy 1 verse 7 says, for, the Lord hath not given us a spirit of fear, but of love, but of power and of a sound mind. So when you understand that fear is not something mental alone, fear actually affects you in your body. And that's what this study is showing here. Anxiety and fear related disorder. You have persons who or psychosomatics, basically, they're always fearful. And it is a condition that is recognized medically. But I also believe that with what is going on, that those anxiety and fear related disorders are even exacerbated and accentuated or exaggerated. If you look at the news, if you listen to all the negative that's just going on, and if you keep your head there, you are almost thinking that there is no hope. And you can find your heart beating fast and you're like, whoa, I wonder if today's the day that I catch COVID and I die. So even with the condition that's going on, it has even heightened anxiety among people and fear. And these things help to make people sick. And so it's a good idea. It is very good to remain in a good mental condition. It is a good idea if you are sick to sort that out. What we're seeing here is that health is immunity. Now, we're not saying that, hey, everybody get healthy. That's the way you will fight COVID. If you're unhealthy, you're going to die. No, we're saying we're going to present some other studies that show other things as well. But what we're saying here is what's coming out we should remember that there are certain sets of persons. There are certain sets of persons who are absolutely low risk. Okay, they are low risk. They are low risk demographic. Certain sets, for example, include children. Most children, they have the strongest immune system. A healthy child has none of these comorbidities. You have children with these, but for the most part, children are absolutely healthy and they possess strong, dynamic immune systems. And so even in this paper, they go on to say something else, and I'll go up. It says here, it says this information can better inform clinical practice and public health priorities, such as identifying populations for focused prevention efforts and potential vaccine prioritization. So they're saying that, hey, these are the people who should come out with a vaccine first. That's what they're saying. All right. So there is a difference. I look at myself and I look at my risk factors when it comes to any medical intervention of any sort. There are always risks. Even if you're going for a surgery, you may not wake up, but you weigh that risk with the benefits to be had. And then you see if you need to take that risk. That's how the risk to benefit weighing has always worked out. Okay, all right, so that's how it works out there. And this is just the first study. So this is the number one. I want to share this one with you to let you know that anxiety and fear related disorders, other things such as essential hypertension, lipid metabolism disorders, these were the strongest underlying conditions that cause people to be hospitalized and then also to go into a bad situation. All right. So let me turn on back my videos off. I want to make sure that you're seeing my video while I speak with you. Okay, so that's one I want to cover. The next one I want to cover with you now Proverbs 17:22 also tells you that a merry heart doeth well like medicine. So find things in life to be happy about, to be thankful, and to be optimistic about. I know that we're all going through a tough time, but tough times won't always last. And the way that you can get through that is to change your mental focus, to change what you're always looking at, so that you're looking at what is good in your life, not just what is bad, because that down spirit will help you. It's the second highest underlying risk factor that will cause you to get sick. All right, so I want to go to the second one here, and this one should interest you a whole lot. And this one has to do with physical activity. Now, why am I, bringing up this study right here? It says physical activity and the risk of COVID-19 infection and mortality. This one excited me when I learned about it. And this one was done based on a nationwide population study. This is amazing. Now, what this does is that it empowers you. It tells you that you can do something about your outcomes. One of the things that's going on is that people are just being disempowered, and they think that their power is only in doing one thing, all right? But you can have the power to do something different. You can have the power, and that power lies in even physical activity, something that we call exercise, okay? So as simple as that. So I want to just talk about what this study is. It says here, this was a retrospective nationwide study that included all Koreans who tested positive for SARS-CoV-2, aimed at evaluating the characteristics and outcomes of patients with COVID-19. So this was actually a nationwide study. So this is a large data set, and you want to look at studies that have a large data set, not just 1,000 or 2,000. You really want to look at studies that cover a large range of persons. Now, when it says retrospective, it means just looking back and comparing the data, all right? It's not like an ongoing clinical trial kind of situation. So the Republic of Korea was one of the first countries to experience a nationwide outbreak of COVID-19. And so the Korean Ministry of Health has supplied complementary and mandatory public health insurance coverage for all patients. So basically, they have everybody's outcomes, everybody's information right there for everybody to see, all right? So let's go back to page 1. And what we're seeing here on page 1 here, let's get into it. It says patients. So what we know, number 1, is that regular physical activity, here on we'll mention it as PA, is known to reduce the risk of serious community-acquired infections. Now, let's look at that for a moment, because you have lifestyle diseases, but you also have something called communicable diseases. Now, COVID-19 is described as a communicable disease, and so the idea is floating around in people's mind that if it's communicable, then what can I do about it? I just have to mask up and try and keep myself safe. And if I get it, oh God, please don't help me to die. No, but what we're seeing here is that a lifestyle change can give you a good outcome when it comes to even a communicable disease. I hope that gives back power into your hands a little bit. I think that this study should have made the front page of every single news tabloid out there, with a little caution saying, hey, we're still looking into it. But in the meantime, everybody, every single person, get exercising, okay? You have something in your hand right now to actually give a good outcome. And that should give you power, and not thinking that, oh, it is communicable. If I catch it, I must get sick, and I probably will go to the hospital and Lord help me not to die. No, that kind of thinking is not good for you. All right. So what they realize is that patients with moderate to vigorous physical activity, called MVPA, were associated with lower risk of COVID-19 morbidity. And I hope that morbidity means that it's spread. So mortality and morbidity are two different terms. Morbidity means it's spread, not necessarily it's mortality, okay? But here's the thing, higher levels of regular physical activity, I'm reading the second highlighted portion there, were associated with a lower risk of COVID-19 infection and mortality. Wow. highlighting the importance of maintaining appropriate levels of physical activity along with social distances amid the COVID-19 pandemic. I hope this encourages you. I hope now you'll say, listen, man, we have to make physical activity a regular thing that we do. Now, we're not talking about if you walk to work, if at work your work involves walking. No, that's not it. Your body is already functional where that is concerned. Your body is used to that. So don't say, well, I walk a lot every day. That's not the same. The moderate to vigorous physical activity, which this study speaks about, is really that which makes you out of breath, that which makes you sweat, that which makes you put your hand on your hip and have to take in a breath. Yes, it may not feel good, but it will bless you in the long term. So it is not time to be sitting down and just eating all that and just growing big and, you know, face round like the moon and say you look like a married person or you look good. No, that's not good for you right now. Physical activity and making it moderate and even to vigorous is always good for you. So I know the gym is a thing, but you don't need to have a gym membership to have this done. All right. There are persons who are moving away the furniture in their homes and they're creating a spot where mommy and daddy and the kids can always work out and can get a sweat on, can get a pump on, can be increasing your breathing so your lungs is just sucking in that good air, especially if you do it in the open air. That's the best thing. So moderate to vigorous physical activity is actually good. I want to go down to, I think, page 6 here and discuss something more with you. This is amazing. I have a lot of things that I'm not discussing tonight, but I'm just discussing the major things so we can get through before the time is out. I want to remain true to what I told you. So here we say a total of 92 deaths occurred during the isolation period due to COVID-19. So, but moderate to vigorous physical activity was associated with a lower mortality in COVID-19 compared with the physically inactive group. Wow. The mortality of COVID-19 patients linearly decreased with an increase in the level of physical activity. So that's what they're reporting from a nationwide study over there in Korea. Now, there are some things to consider. Of course, we realize that diseases actually express themselves more or less based upon race. Yes, so it is a fact that certain races are more predisposed to certain diseases. Why exactly, we don't know. However, we hope that this is translatory over into whatever society you're in. And I do believe that it is, because if it works so well for the Koreans, why won't it work for you? And what do you have to lose? You'll only get healthier, more functional for going ahead. If you're already doing this, don't slack off now. Keep it going and know that this is also medicine. This is the way that you keep diseases at bay. All right. So not because you're big and thick means that you're actually well, because you have something. The name is, let me search my brain and see, but the name is escaping me right now. I probably remember before this is out. But you can have a lot of flesh in your body, but no muscle, and that muscle is needed to release good substances into your body. All right. So I'm just going to finish off with a few pages here. Page 7. Once again, I am able to send these to you. And this was actually featured in the British Medical Journal. And that's a top-notch journal. And the one I'm reading you is from the Journal of Clinical Medicine 2021. So this is not an obscure study done somewhere over there by some people who don't know what they're talking about. These are studies that doctors read, and when come together in the yearly meetings, these things are discussed so that you can get ongoing education. So let's talk about it a little bit. It says several potential mechanisms could explain the role of physical activity in reducing the risk. So they're trying now to explain why. Regular aerobic exercise may boost innate immunity. So you want to boost your immunity? Get exercising, and result in enhanced protection against viral infections. That's amazing, because a communicable disease is now affected by a lifestyle change. Wow. In addition, regular physical activity suppresses inflammation and reduces the risk of being overweight and obese and obesity, which are strongly related with the risk of COVID-19. Remember, we went through that in the first study. So we're building block on top of block. Moderate exercise in mice decreased the morbidity, that's the spread, and mortality, that's the ability to kill, associated with herpes simplex virus type 1 and lung macrophages, provided the exercise-mediated protection against the virus. That's amazing. Exercise training increases the natural killer cell activity compared with that from pre-training. Did you know if you want to boost and modulate your immune system to kill and to be on high alert, the macrophage activity is boosted when you exercise? Oh my, I hope you are excited about this. So it says exercise also improves the level of pro-inflammatory cytokines and T helper cytokine balance, as well as T cell function. T cells are the killer cells, the snipers. If you want to boost that and modulate your immune system, you should be exercising moderate to vigorously in a consistent way. Individuals who perform high levels of physical activity are characterized by enhanced vagal tone, which may favorably affect cholinergic anti-inflammatory pathway. Okay, I'm going to stop here. I don't want to get carried away with that, but it talks about some other good things, okay? So I just want to pause here and come back to the screen and chat with you a little bit. Let me see here. And I hope that you're getting good information and that you are being edified by this stuff. Okay, so far we've gone through 2, and those 2 studies taught us about the underlying risks that 95%, not just 20%, but most, let's just say practically all the people who end up in hospital have these 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 of these underlying conditions. Now, if you have any of these conditions, you want to pay it very strict mind. You want to be looking at that and saying, hey, how can I even use lifestyle changes? You don't want to be slacking off now, okay? But if you don't have any of these, you should receive the good news and know that the studies show that 95% of the persons who are ending up in hospital don't have these things, all right? You want to make sure now you put a priority on health, because health is immunity. Gone are the days when you can just think about your immunity as something separate from your health. Your immunity is you and who you are and how well you take care of yourself. Mentally as well, we learned that from the first one. So, okay, so anxiety and fear related disorders, you want to get rid of that. You want to know that you are going to be blessed and you're going to be well. Number 2, we looked at physical activity. So if you're just coming on, know that we were looking at physical activity, boosting physical activity. We read so many things that it took care of. Anti-inflammatory responses are boosted, cytokine, T helper, that's boosted. You are in much better shape overall if you keep that going. So those are 2 things that we know so far. Some of you already know this. Some of you maybe for the first time. Regardless, we're talking here. Let's move on some more so we can learn some more on this. All right. So get moving. All right. I'm going to share another one with you now. Let me share my screen again. Okay. Host, could you allow me to share or make me host? Yes. One moment. Let's give that a little time. So this next study, which I'll bring up for you, is a hallmark study, a watershed study that caused the CDC to reverse their mask mandates, okay? Or to reverse their encouragement or word or guidance on masks. Remember that there was a time that the CDC said, hey, listen, you don't really have to wear your mask if you're fully vaccinated. If you have double jabbed, you really don't need to mask. That's what they were basically saying. And here it is. And it's a morbidity and mortality weekly report. So every week, the CDC, Centers for Disease Control, releases what we know as a morbidity and mortality weekly report, MMWR, okay? And you can follow those on their website as well. So this one was released August 6th. And it spoke about a celebration that took place on July 4, Remember, July 4 is America's independence. All right. So this study was done in July, but it was released on August 6th. And because of the findings of this, what happened is that the CDC reversed their word or their guidance on masking. And they say, hey, even if you're fully vaccinated, slap on back your mask, man. It's not as good as we thought. Once again, I make the claim that this is emerging. No one can speak as if they know everything. No one can say, we are the science, you shut up. No, that's not going to work now, because we're all learning as this thing unfolds. Some things remain true in terms of principles, exercise being one of them, can never harm you. That's always something good. All right, so let's get into it. So in Barnstable, Massachusetts, a lot of persons know about this one already. They gathered for July 4 celebration. And what happened coming out of that big gathering is that a lot of persons came down with COVID-19. Very few of them were actually hospitalized. However, there was a lot of spread. And prior to this, the idea was there that if you're fully vaccinated, you can't receive or spread it. But after this, they realized that they had to dial back on that kind of speaking, because they found out that this is not necessarily supported by science. And so you probably need to still wear your mask. All right. So let's move on here. It says, I'm going to read just the highlighted portions for you. Once again, if you need this, you can find it on CDC's website, or I'm able to send it to you as well. It says here, approximately 3/4. No, four quarters make a whole, but approximately 3/4 or 74% of cases occurred in fully vaccinated persons. Those who had completed a 2-dose course of mRNA vaccine, and we're talking about the Pfizer BioNTech or Moderna here, or had received a single dose of the Johnson & Johnson vaccine more than 14 days. So what they found here is that overall, 79%. No, I want to go back to that 14 days thing. I may not remember to say this to you, but it is a fact that if you receive a jab today or your second dose today, and you should come down with a disease, with the COVID-19 disease, within 14 days, you are counted as unvaccinated, according to the CDC's classification. And that's a fact, okay? That's how the CDC, they do not classify you as fully vaccinated, even if you receive the second shot, until after 14 days after the second shot. So if anything happens to you within those 14 days and you die, you will be counted as an unvaccinated death, all right? Just so you know, that is a way of counting that is out there. And this is known, this is a legal fact that I'm telling you, all right? I've gotten this from their website as well. All right, so let's go on here. It says overall, 79% of these persons who came down, vaccinated patients with breakthrough infection were symptomatic, meaning they got ill. Among 5 COVID-19 patients who were hospitalized, 4 were fully vaccinated. No deaths were reported. So only 5 persons were hospitalized, and no deaths were reported. Okay, but of the 5, 4 were fully vaccinated. And so the CDC had to say, hey man, slap on back those things on your face. It's not over. We thought that, you would be okay, but hey, let's get going again. Let's put on back those masks. And also that went out the door was that if you are fully vaccinated, you are not able to pass it on. We see here that that is not so. So real-time PCR cycle threshold values in specimens from 127 vaccinated persons with breakthrough cases were similar to those of 84 persons who were unvaccinated. Basically no difference, or not fully vaccinated. So it was the same. The PCR testing was the same, all right? So what they found is that the Delta variant is highly transmissible, meaning it spreads more. Its ratio of morbidity is very high. But what we also saw with it is that its case fatality ratio was not as high as the wild or the first one. So vaccination is the most important strategy to prevent severe illness and death, as this report says. But they will go on to say that findings from this investigation suggest that even jurisdictions without substantial or high COVID-19 transmission might consider expanding prevention strategies, including masking in indoor public setting, regardless of vaccination status. Now, this is very big. Given the potential risk of infection during attendance at large public gatherings that include travelers from many areas with different levels of transmission. Okay, so this is very big. And because of this report, they found now that certain things that they were saying, they had to stop saying, such as if you are not vaccinated, you are spreading it more than anybody else because anybody else who were vaccinated, they are a full stop. But that now proved not to be so. A vaccinated person could also be as vulnerable as a non-vaccinated. Okay, we're going to go on to some more. Remember, we're building step by step tonight. But they still said that the vaccine was working because they had no hospitalization. That is what, no deaths. That is what is the claim to fame for the vaccines in this war against the virus, is that, hey, it lessens or blunts the severity of the disease, so you may not need hospitalization or you may not die. So that's what it is. The people saying that you're going to spread it more is not so. Okay, that is out the door. And I don't remember if I have a table on this device, but I could share that with you of some things that were said, but no are changed. All right, so this here was a watershed moment and everything changed going from here. I want to share some stuff with you as we move into the next phase of what we're talking about tonight. Let me check my time. Great. So I hope you're seeing my screen here. Are you able to see it? Co-host? Okay, great stuff. So I'm sharing some web pages with you. This one coming from the Washington Post. It says here, natural immunity to COVID is powerful. Policymakers seem afraid to say so. Do you remember what we talked about earlier on? That if you're going to make a policy, it must be founded upon the foundation. Some water. It must be founded upon the foundation of science. And that's what we're seeing. However, policymakers currently are tight-lipped about natural immunity. And as you read through here, it says it's okay to have an incorrect scientific hypothesis, but when new data proves it wrong, you have to adapt, as we've been seeing. Unfortunately, many elected leaders and public health officials have held on far too long. Thank you. They've held on far too long to the hypothesis that natural immunity offers unreliable protection against COVID-19, a contention that is being rapidly debunked by science. Wow. So let's talk about this a little bit. At the beginning of the pandemic, everyone was saying, we don't know how long natural immunity will last. Okay, you came down with the illness, you recovered, but we're not certain. Okay, now many months pass. The studies that are emerging are actually proving that natural immunity is robust, long-lasting, and is strong in most patients. Of course, you have patients who are ill. Of course, they may relapse, but we're going to see some stuff as we go on tonight. So this is what this website is saying. It says here more than 15 studies have demonstrated the power of immunity acquired by previously having the virus. A 700,000 person study from Israel 2 weeks ago found that those who had experienced prior infections were 27 times less likely to get a second symptomatic COVID infection than those who were vaccinated. We're actually going to go into that study in a short while. But this here is one website that is just putting it out and saying, hey, why are officials and policymakers afraid just to say, hey, if you've had a prior illness, we could consider that? Why is there a broad brush approach and not a nuanced approach as it pertains to people? Okay, so when it comes to any medical analysis of people, you have two persons coming down with the same thing. You don't necessarily treat them the same. Doctors know this. You take a history on each person and you treat them based upon their situation. So the science of medicine is very individualistic. And so you have to take a history on the person and know the person and approach them in a very individual and special manner. I know that broad brushed vaccination, trying to break the back of an infection, has been the approach of many. But then again, there are many persons all over the world who are coming out and saying this approach in the middle of the pandemic may not have been the best because it does other things as well. But that's another thing. But we're just looking here at natural immunity. Let's go to another one. So of course, Rand Paul is at Fauci all the time. But it says here, Dr. Anthony Fauci said he did not have a firm answer when asked if natural immunity offered better protection from COVID-19 than the vaccine. He could not say. However, everyone is looking and saying from the science that we're seeing, how can you not? Okay, so a lot of things are coming out. Let's look at another one here. It says, previous COVID prevents Delta infection better than Pfizer shot. This one here is from Bloomberg. So these are regular websites. These are not like dedicated anti-vax websites. And I don't even want to digress when it comes to that term, but I find that that term is being used very widely and people don't know who is an anti-vaxxer and even the history of what that forms. If someone today has a question about things that they need answered, they're called an anti-vaxxer. Come on, we have to think more critically than that. Anything that you accept without questioning, I don't think you are a thinking human being anymore. You should question even your teachers. You should question even your religion. That's how you know that you truly believe it. If you have answered all your questions without any contradiction, then you are truly who you say you are. So to want to take something and not to have questions about it is just something unthinkable in these times. So there's nothing wrong with asking questions. And not everyone who asks a question is a real bona fide anti-vaxxer. All right, so just want to share those with you before we head into the second phase of this, where we'll show you some other researches that came out as it pertains to natural immunity. Well, grab your pens, here we go. Next one I want to share with you is this one here, entitled "No Point Vaccinating Those Who Had COVID-19." This was before the Delta variant came out, okay? So this one was done June 8, 2021. Deal just on the cusp of it really coming out and being a significant of epidemiological significance. At that point, it just wasn't yet. So this study came out of the prestigious Cleveland Clinic, and that's what the study suggests. All right. Of course, it's a preprint, so it's going to be later on peer-reviewed, but it's here for anyone to see. You can find these online if you're interested. Interest is the first qualification to learning, and you cannot teach someone who is uninterested. So scientists from the Cleveland Clinic, USA, have recently evaluated the effectiveness of the coronavirus disease vaccination among individuals with or without a history of severe acute respiratory syndrome. All right. So the study findings reveal that individuals with previous SARS-CoV infection do not get additional benefits from the vaccination, indicating that COVID-19 vaccines should be prioritized to individuals without prior infection. And we'll get into that a little bit. So I hope you understand what they're saying is that, hey, if someone has already received something and they've gotten the benefit from it, and you're about to give them a medical intervention to get the benefit which they already have, come on. They're saying this study is showing that the natural immunity actually kicks in. The thing about natural immunity is that if someone were to malign or to impugn it, they also impugn vaccinated mediated immunity. To speak bad about natural immunity is also inadvertently to speak bad about what the vaccine will do for you. So I can understand why policymakers are tight-lipped. I know, for the sake of the economy, they're making certain moves. And so, but when it comes to natural immunity, that's another question that needs to be rightly answered. But you have to be careful in how you answer it, because to answer it in any way negative can also bring down as well the vaccination drive. So let's look at this. So important observations. Stick with me here. No, don't lose me. Okay. Shake your head and let's go. So it says here, interestingly, I'm going to read the highlighted portions. It says here, interestingly, no significant difference in COVID-19 incidence was observed between previously infected and currently unvaccinated participants. Get that? So number one group is previously infected, but currently unvaccinated. Okay, so many persons out there, they have had the disease and they're currently unvaccinated. So they're saying that no significant differences were seen in this group. Let's look at the next group. The next group is previously infected and currently vaccinated. So if you had it, but you still went and got the vaccine, they're saying there was no difference between those who had it and didn't get the vaccine. And another group, the next group is previously uninfected and currently vaccinated participants. So those persons have not had the disease, but they've had a vaccination, okay? So they're saying absolutely no difference between the three groups. The only group that they saw a difference in were those that were not infected and remain unvaccinated, okay? So, I mean, you have to extrapolate and hypothesize that risk because they are not yet infected, but they remain unvaccinated. So you have to say, well, you know, that's the only group that this study couldn't really provide an opinion about. So in contrast, only 0.7% of infections occurred in participants who were not previously infected, but were currently vaccinated. Okay, so there was still some infection going on even in those who were not previously infected, but were currently vaccinated. Amazing. However, so this study here is pretty simple, it's pretty straight to the point. And this is a report that was done here by this doctor, but it was done in the Cleveland Clinic. And if you know the Cleveland Clinic, they give continuing education points for many people who are looking to, you know, just remain atop of things, know what's going on in the medical fraternity and stuff like that. All right, especially as it regards to their area of specialty. So that's another study here. Once again, if you need these things, you're able to get them. But that's amazing. When I learned of this one, I'm like, wow, this is a great study. And it shows the fact as it pertains to natural immunity. All right, so let's go on. Okay, no, there's another part on here. My notes tell me to go on in the discussion. Yes. So it says here, the scarcity of vaccines coupled with the knowledge that vaccines do not provide additional protection to those who have already been infected is the strongest argument for restricting vaccine administrations to those who have not had the infection. So of course, they will go on to say that, okay? All right, so let's go on to the next one here. And for this study, so let me check my time. I think I'm doing well. And for this study here, this one is actually coming out of the nation of Israel. So if you've been following the news, you'll hear a whole lot about Israel, Israel, Israel. You're like, why Israel? What's so special? Well, Israel was actually among the first countries to speed rush and, you know, vaccinate their population or majority of their population first, all right? So they were ahead. Few countries were ahead, but Israel was one of them. So Israel, in a way, has become like the case study for the world. And they're looking at Israel and seeing what's happening. Of course, we know that a lot of things are happening in Israel, and we'll get to that in a little bit. But that's why they're looking now at Israel. Let's read the abstract of this preprint. And let's read the title first. It says, protection. They're looking at protection of previous SARS-CoV-2 infection. And they're seeing that it is similar, meaning natural infection and recovery. They're seeing that it is similar to that of the BioNTech 1626B2 vaccine, which is the Pfizer vaccine protection. And this was a 3-month nationwide experience from Israel. Of course, kind of early, 3 months. 3 months afterwards, I mean, but hey, let's take it for what it is and let's go into this study, all right? So in the abstract, it says that a worldwide shortage of vaccination against the virus infection while the pandemic is still uncontrollable leads many states to the dilemma whether or not to vaccinate previously infected persons. Understanding the level of protection of previous infection compared to that of vaccination is critical to policy making. Wow, let's pause there. You remember earlier on I said to you that policies must be based upon what? Science. Policies never stand alone, unhinged in a vacuum or by themselves, meaning absolutely nothing to the real world. When you find a policy that's no longer standing on science, you know that science is not the thing which is informing that policy. This is simple reasoning, okay? So let's get back to it. It says here, so understanding the level of protection from previous infection compared to that of vaccination is critical to policy making. And that is why they're doing these studies. That's why they're looking at these things. So it says here, vaccination was highly effective with overall estimated efficacy for documented infection of 92.8. All right, so they're saying that the vaccination so far, based on the 3 months that they've looked at, is highly effective in that, you know, people don't go to hospital because 92.8 per person's hospitalization, 94.2 wasn't, you know, was not there. Severe illness by 94.4% and death by 93.7. Those are absolutely good numbers, okay? However, similarly, the overall estimated level of protection from prior SARS-CoV-2 infection or documented infection is 94.8 for infection, hospitalization 94.1, and severe illness 96.4. Our results question the need to vaccinate previously infected individuals. Wow. So in looking at this from the nation of Israel, and at the top of the screen, you can see, I can send these to you, but you're able to find them as well on the internet as they're released, so that those, especially of the medical professional, but it's not only for them. If you want this information, you can get it as well, and you can discuss it with your doctor. Discuss it with them, and a good doctor will take your questions, will see what you're saying, and will engage you in a conversation. All right, so that's what they're saying. Hey, our observation, you know, we question the need to vaccinate previously infected. So if you're on here tonight and you've had a given a positive, maybe you were asymptomatic, we're going to talk about that too. Maybe you were symptomatic and you went through the bout of the disease. You should have, it is reasonable to expect that you have some level of immunity, not only to the wild first one, the what we call alpha, but also to many variants, as we will see in a short while. Remember, we're building step by step. So this was the first one that came out of Israel, but there's another one which I'm about to go to. So here they focus on 4 cohorts again, much like the study that I just mentioned from the Cleveland Clinic. Here, they use those 4 groups again. Unvaccinated individuals, vaccinated individuals followed from first dose to a week after the second dose. Vaccinated individuals follows from a week after the second dose onwards, and a recovered cohort of unvaccinated individuals previously infected, okay? So they use those 4 groups again, just like we saw in the first. And as you read through this study, hey, listen, you got to strengthen your mind. You got to read. You know, watching too much TV sometimes and just watching movies and just being detained to be entertained will make your mental powers weak. You know, reading is a good thing to do. You know, rehash the nerd in you. There is a nerd in every one of us. And if the need is there, you got to rehash that nerd. And where interest is, you'll find that you put interest. Yes. All right. So let's move on here. So this was the first one coming out of Israel. And let me see if there was something else that I'm to cover here. I have in my notes that I'm to scroll on to the discussion, which I think I'm there now. So here's the discussion. We're going to look at this a little bit. So it was a population-based observational study demonstrates that the high efficacy of the Pfizer vaccine and prior infection against both subsequent future infections of the COVID-19 related outcomes. They're seeing that both these things affected it. Well, there are a few characteristics that make the study unique. First, it was a nationwide study, and thus represented the real world effectiveness of vaccination and prior infection on the full population. So what I said earlier on, that This is evolving, not evolving, this is emerging. As it comes out, we look at what it is saying and then we analyze it. Hey, a scientist, a PhD person can sit down and can tell you theoretically, based on his learning, how it should work. But nothing beats when it is actually rolled out in the real world. And that's why you do what we call long range observation on subjects who have received a certain scientific or medical intervention, okay? So second, it used individual level data that enabled at least to some degree to mitigate biases caused by selection to get vaccinated, selection to undergo PCR testing, and the time, let me sort this out. All right. And the time-changing level of risk via adjustment for between cohort differences in individuals, characteristics, and municipality risk level. Third, the study included follow-up and population for a period of 3 months, allowing follow-up and fully vaccinated cohorts over an extended duration. All right, so blah, blah, blah. Many of you are like, blah, 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 what is he talking about? But I hope that you're getting what we're seeing here. So it is plain from this Israel study after just 3 months that there was absolutely no difference between those who recovered from the disease and those who received the jab, basically. All right, so we're going to go on to some more things. Remember, we're building step by step and seeing what emerges as it happens. All right, let's go to another one. This is the next one from Israel, okay? And this one came out some months prior to that first one. And what they're comparing now is something different. They are now comparing and looking at natural immunity to vaccine-induced immunity as it pertains to reinfections or versus breakthrough infections. So the first one just looked at, hey, were you protected? But this one is now analyzing reinfections based upon the wide morbidity of the Delta variant in it especially. So let's go into it. And it says, reports of waning vaccine-induced immunity against COVID-19 has begun to surface. With that, the comparable long-term protection conferred by previous infection with SARS-2 remains unclear. Okay, so what is known is that the vaccine-mediated immunity is waning, it's getting weaker. That's known, that's a given. However, what they don't know is how natural immunity stands up against this. So, hey, let's go into it. Let's look what's going on, is what they're saying, because a scientist has an open mind to learn and to see where the evidence leads. So he may always know what is truth. So the results here is the results, and I'm going to discuss this with you. It says SARS-CoV-2 naive vaccinees. Well, naive means they weren't told the purpose of the study. They didn't know. They just know that they were a part of a study, they were a subject in a study, but they weren't told. So that's what it means. They were naive, okay? So the SARS-CoV-2 naive vaccinees, those who received the vaccine, had a 13.6-fold selective increased risk for breakthrough infection with the Delta variant compared to those previously infected. That's amazing. So they were, when somebody says, twice as much, that's a lot, right? And then when somebody says 10 times, I remember when I was a little boy or going to school, we always 10 times more. Well, this was 13 times more increased risk for breakthrough infection with the Delta variant compared to previously infected. Of course, there are generally two schools of thought out there why this may happen. One is that simply the vaccine is waning in its ability to protect. Another one is that the vaccines cannot fight against something which has changed because the vaccines were specific. And if it was specific, then how can it now fight against something which is now different? See? So these are the two schools of thought. There are studies on those two, which I did not include in tonight's installment of this. So it says here, SARS-CoV-2 naive vaccinees were also at a greater risk for COVID-19 related hospitalizations compared to those that were previously infected. So, wow. You know, this, and as I said, in Barnstable, Massachusetts, they say, hey guys, put on back your mask, let's go back to square one, basically. Well, at least you won't be in hospital. You can rest assured that you probably won't end up in hospital and die, but you can still get this thing and even fall sick and even be in the hospital. And in certain cases all over the world now, we're seeing where people are dying, even if they have received. So don't think that if you have received it, that's the end of it, that you can just, I'm okay, Jack. You got to exercise, you got to take care of yourself. There are many other things for you to do to stay healthy for yourself and for your family. All right, so they saw that they were at greater risk. So the conclusions of this study, let's get to it. This study demonstrated that natural immunity confers longer, lasting, and stronger protection against infection, symptomatic disease, and hospitalizations caused by the Delta variant of SARS-CoV-2 when compared to the Pfizer's two-dose vaccine-induced immunity. Individuals who were both previously infected with SARS-CoV-2 and given a single dose of vaccine gained additional protection against the Delta variant. Okay? But what they said here was simple and to the point. If you had natural immunity, it conferred longer lasting and stronger protection. So that thing that we didn't know, I remember, you know, having a wonderful conversation with someone, and she was a medical professional, and she said to me, well, we really don't know, you know, how long that will last. Well, no, we can't say that anymore. Many months hence, we have an idea, and we even know how much longer the vaccine mediated will last, which is about, according to CDC Director Walensky, she says about 6 months, okay? But we're also seeing some cases where people are dying just the same. So, hey, taking care of yourself is a good idea. Remember, health is immunity. And, you know, many of us, I know, we just want to get back to normal and start with partying again, drink up the whole heap of liquor, destroy your liver. Hey, I am a health reformer, and I can tell you that you're going to kill yourself. And in this time, I still see people turning their lungs into a chimney with that. Your lungs, which is so precious, you know, has become the servant of just deranged treatment through smoking. And yes, you're saying the presenter is coming down hard on that. I must. If I love you, I must tell you the truth. And the truth is that you're going to kill yourself if you think that taking something and returning to your normal life will save you. Okay, so let's move on here. I'm going to go into another one again. And this one came out in the journal Nature. Now, if you know about medical journals, you'll find that Lancet is a top tier medical journal. The Nature, Science, the British Medical Journal, and a couple others. So when articles come out in those, it's a big deal as well. So this one came out in the Nature Journal. It's just the other day, and it's called A Long-Term Perspective on Immunity to COVID. See the time? Great. And no, what this is assessing, let's read here. Now, shake up in your seats and follow me. We have about 24 minutes remaining, and we have some way to go. And we're building step by step. It says here, our immune systems protect against SARS-CoV-2 either through one, a sophisticated reaction to infection, or in a response to vaccination. So they're saying there are two ways, naturally or by a medical intervention called a vaccine. All right. The quick question is, how long does this immunity last? So Turner et al. And Wang et al. Now characterize human immune responses to SARS-CoV-2 infection over the course of a year. So these are two major lead scientists, helped by many other scientists who published their findings that are now being taken up and are used as foundation for guidance in policy making. All right, so let's read here. And tonight, I hope you come out here learning. If you are not scientifically inclined, learning some more about how your body works. So here is something, it says, there is probably consensus that the two main pillars of antiviral response are One, immune cells called cytotoxic T cells, which can selectively eliminate infected cells, and two, neutralizing antibodies, a type of antibody that prevents a virus from infecting cells that is secreted by the immune cells called plasma cells. Okay, so let's break that down. So, normally people talk about antibodies, antibodies, antibodies. However, antibodies through plasma cells in long term is just one way. Another way, or the combination of ways, is with the T cell, cytotoxic T cells that remain in your system. That is how robust an immune system works, all right? And there are many other ways. So those two ways. So let's look at it some more. Immunological memory is not a long-lasting version of the immediate immune reaction to a particular virus. Rather, it is a distinct aspect of the immune system. Let's talk about that. So when you get the virus and you have a reaction, you have a fever, you have all those things, your body says, hey, there's a war going on, let's win this, and you get sick for a while, you have symptoms which we call sickness. They're saying that immunological memory is not this. What immunological memory is a transition from this to actual the production of plasma cells, which are stored in the blood, in the body's bone marrow. Make sense? So look at this little diagram here. It says here you have an acute response, but then it goes on, the acute response fades, and then what picks up is long-term immunity, long-lasting immunity. And so what they're looking for in this specific study is to see the transition from the acute immune response to immunological memory, which is long-term. I hope that you're following me here. It's very not so hard to understand. It says the presence in the bone marrow of long-lived antibodies secreting memory plasma cells is probably the best indicator that you have not only converted or seroconverted from a sickness, but that you've gone on to provide long-term immunity within your body, okay? So it says, nevertheless, Turner and colleagues detected memory plasma cells, I'm over here, that secreted antibodies specific for the spike protein encoded by the SARS-CoV-2 in 15 of 19 individuals approximately 7 months after infection. Well, let's go on. Notably, when the authors obtained samples 4 months later, 11 months, the number of such plasma cells had remained stable in all but one of the individuals analyzed. So what he's saying is these persons converted from an acute response to a long-term. And that's what we're looking at, all right? So he says this is consistent with the expectation that 10 to 20% of the plasma cells in an acute immune reaction become memory plasma cells, and is a clear indication of a shift from antibody production by short-lived plasma cells to antibody production by memory plasma cells. Amazing. You see, you were wonderfully, fearfully, and wonderfully made. And there is more that we do not know about our bodies than what we have known so far. This is not unexpected, given that immune memory to many viruses and vaccines is stable over decades, if not for a lifetime. All right, so that's what they've seen. For example, they speak here of SARS-CoV-1, a coronavirus very like SARS-CoV-2, that was originally identified in 2003 and caused severe acute respiratory syndrome. The continued presence of high concentration of neutralizing antibodies in blood serum for more than 17 years was reported in 2020. So that's amazing. So they're saying we expect SARS-CoV-2 to be very similar. That if you've gotten sick from this thing and you have, convalesced, meaning that you have gotten better, we expect it to have long-term immunity just the same, just like with SARS-CoV-1. Amazing. So that's something there that you should be encouraged over. There's another one again. And this was a research article which immunological memory to SARS-CoV-2 was assessed for up to 8 months after. I'm just going to read this one here so I can move on quickly. It says the conclusion, and this was a wonderful study, very easy to understand when you read through it. Says substantial immune memory is generated after COVID-19 involving all 4 major types of immune memory. About 95% of subjects retained immune memory at 6 months after infection, circulating antibody titers or levels were not predicted of T cell memory. Okay, so that's very good for you to know. Your antibody level is not predicted of your T cell memory. Your T cell memory is just a different section of your immune system that works as well in tandem with your antibodies. Okay, so it's not just antibodies alone. Actually, we're seeing that testing for levels of T cell may be a better indicator. I have another study to that, better indicator of your immunity than antibody, just testing for your antibodies, okay? Thus, simple serological tests for SARS-CoV-2 do not reflect the richness and durability of immune memory to SARS-CoV-2. All right, so there's much more that you're learning about it, and they're moving on. This was a very long one. Don't worry about it if you don't understand everything. If you drop asleep while reading it, that's all right. It's just like building your stamina in anything. All right, it will grow. All right, so let's move on here. All right, and I'm coming down. Let's see how many minutes we have left. 8:43, about 17 minutes. I want to go here to this next one, which is the most exciting one for me lately, which is the second to last one I will share with you tonight. And this one is once again featured in the Nature Journal. And the SARS-CoV-2 specific T-cell immunity in cases of COVID-19 and SARS and uninfected controls. Now, I hope you're seeing what's on the screen. This study will show you something amazing, which scientists are still looking at. They have taken uninfected controls or uninfected people who never saw COVID-19. They took these from 2018. They took the blood samples from 2018, tested the blood samples, and found that they had specific T cell that reacted, not only reacted to, but were specific to SARS-CoV-2. How is that possible? Makes you rub your head. And so there are some doctors and scientists all over the world who are saying there are people who are actually just naturally immune to this thing. And probably that's why they just don't get sick in the first place, because they already have, their immune system is already informed. Amazing. And let me give you the date on this one. It was accepted on July 7, 2021, published July 15, 2020, all right? So this is amazing. Early on out in the study, that's what they saw. So I'm gonna read here so you can understand. It says, little is known about the presence in humans of pre-existing memory T cells that have potential to recognize severe acute respiratory syndrome coronavirus 2. So they don't know much about previous memory T cells. So they're studying this. So here we studied T cell responses against the structural, or that's the nucleocapsid protein, and non-structural NSP7 and NSP13 of the regions of the SARS-CoV-2 virus, to keep it simple, okay? In people getting better from coronavirus disease 2019, which is COVID-19, okay? In all these individuals, they found that there were CD4 and CD8 T cells that recognize multiple regions of the nucleocapsid protein. That's amazing. So in all these individuals who are getting better, they found that there were CD4 and CD8 T cells that recognize multiple regions of the nucleocapsid protein. All right, no big deal. That's something that you call cross-reactivity. So, you could have one of the previous beta coronaviruses and those T cells from the coronaviruses, still cross-react with SARS-CoV-2. Whether it neutralize it to provide protective immunity is a different thing. But the fact is it actually binds to the receptor binding domain, all right? But let's go on. Let's look at the blue part, and it says next, we showed that patients who recovered from the disease from SARS-1, so they're talking about SARS-1, the first one that came out in 2003. They showed that patients who recovered from SARS-1 possess long-lasting memory T cells that are reactive to the nucleocapsid protein of SARS-CoV 17 years after the outbreak. These T cells displayed a robust cross-reactivity to the N protein of the SARS-CoV-2. So those persons who had that cold or that disease back in that time, they had some memory T cells that were actually reacting against the nucleocapsid protein of the virus. That's amazing, and that's some good news that they're finding out. They also detected that SARS-CoV-2 specific T cells in individuals with no history. Now, this is the part that shocked me, and it may shock you. They also detected that SARS-CoV-2 specific T cells. So far we've seen cross-reactive T cells, but specific T cells means that it is specific to SARS-CoV-2. In individuals with no history of SARS, COVID-19, or contact with individuals who have had SARS or COVID-19, SARS-CoV-2 specific T cells in uninfected donors exhibited a different pattern of immunodominance, frequently targeting these areas of the virus, okay? So how is that possible? That you've never had the disease, these samples were taken from 2018, and yet still that's what it showed. So that's what they're seeing. And they're looking into that and seeing that maybe that could explain why we have people who are so-called asymptomatic. It may not be that they're asymptomatic. It may be that they are already immune. This is a big read, and I'll just end off on this one here on the conclusion for you. So it is unclear why NSP7 and NSP13 are detected and often dominant in unexposed donors. Nobody knows why, okay? But it is our duty to find out why. And as I said, there is less that we know about our bodies than what we boast to know. So while representing a minor population in individuals who have recovered from SARS or SARS-CoV-2, it is, however, consistent with the findings of a previous study in which they saw that they were preferentially detected in some donors who were not exposed to SARS-CoV-2, all right? So basically, I would love to read all that for you, but I want to move on to the next and final study for this evening as we move into the last 10 minutes, all right? So I hope so far this has made sense to you, and I'm going to end off with a conclusion on it all. Here is another one again. It says, scientists identify natural SARS-CoV-2 super immunity against 23 variants. I hope this is giving you some hope. So, you know, we're playing a war of variants now. We're in a war of variants. And the idea is that, oh, well, give me another one which pertains to this variant. Well, not necessarily, or boost me up again, sir. Well, what they're finding is that there is what they call super immunity against 23 variants. I believe it's more, but that's just my personal belief, which is not founded on science. What I'm about to read to you is science so far. All right, so the antibodies are capable. What they found is that these antibodies are capable of neutralizing a wide range of SARS-CoV-2 variants, even at sub-nanomolar concentrations. In addition, the combination of these antibodies reduce the risk of generating escape mutants in vitro. The study is published in the journal Science. Amazing. So you have immune escape mutants. They mutate. I mean, if you pressure something, it mutates. Listen, what doesn't kill you make you stronger. So if you pressure something a certain way and you don't necessarily neutralize it, if it will change and it will escape your pressuring. So if every time I go into some place, they're pressuring my red hat, I'm like, hey, every time I go in, they're just coming after my red hat. I'm like, what's wrong with these guys, man? I'll just turn it back ways. But sometimes when they turn it back ways, you find that you can't do as you could do when you had it on front ways. So that's why many mutants are not as their mortality ratio is not as high as the original one, but nevertheless, they may be able to cause hospitalization and sickness, okay? So he changes because he's been pressured. That is the idea. So let's look at it. It says a majority of therapeutic antibodies against SARS-CoV-2 have been designed based on the native spike protein. Basically, the majority of vaccines have been designed based on the native spike protein. So the vaccines that are now issued worldwide are based upon the spike protein. But there are other things on the surface of the coronavirus. There are other sections to it, okay? But if you receive the vaccine, it's specific to the spike protein sequence found in the original Wuhan strain. Thus, the new variants, which with multiple spike protein mutations may likely develop resistance against these antibodies. Make sense? So the antibodies that the vaccine helps your bodies to form, the mutants can easily have resistance to it. It's simple what they're saying here. In this context, studies have shown that antibodies developed in response to current available vaccines have less efficiency in neutralizing the novel variants of concern. Make sense? That's including the Delta there, and they tell you some others. That makes sense, right? It's right to the point. So antibody identification, the antibodies were isolated from 4 convalescent donors infected with the Washington strain of SARS-CoV-2. The spike sequence in AA strain is similar to the spike sequence in the Wuhan strain, okay? And they go on to tell you what happened. So to determine whether the high potency of antibodies could block ACE2, spike binding, interferometry, ACE2 competition, and cell surface binding assays were performed. Here's what came out of this now. The findings reveal that of the 4 antibodies, 2 bound to receptor binding domains in the up position and 2 bound. Listen, you don't let that trouble you too much. What it is basically saying, 3 out of 4 antibodies directly block ACE2 interaction. So on your cell, in each of your body cells, you have something called ACE2 binding domain, angiotensin converting enzyme 2 domain, okay? So the spike protein from the coronavirus basically latches on. It has a strong binding affinity to the ACE2 of your cell. It latches onto that and opens up the door and goes in. So they're saying, hey, if we could have things that block it, then of course, you know, your outcomes may be different. I also have in my possession a study done with what's it called? B. propolis, where they show that B. propolis has a high affinity to ACE2 interaction of your cells. And so, you know, you upping your B. propolis could be a way of out-competing these bad guys for your ACE2, okay? And so you're not becoming sick. So that's this last study here. And it really encouraged me when I found out about it. And so I hope that you are encouraged based on what I have shared with you here tonight. Let me see here how I can go back now and come back here. Okay, start my video, stop sharing. Okay, great. So we've gone through some things tonight. There are many more studies to go through, but I know that we only have like an hour and a half, and we're 5 minutes from ending. I do want to keep the time, as I said, I would keep it in the first place. So let's look at this. First study we went through, underlying medical conditions showing that there are certain pre-existing comorbidities that, you know, will put you in hospital, 95%. All right, so that's good news. Now you have information to say, hey, if I have these things, I need to keep it controlled. I need to live a healthy lifestyle, because these diseases of lifestyle, diseases of opulence or convenience in our time can get you sick. All right. And what we saw is that fear-related disorders accounted for the second highest likelihood of getting you in the hospital. That was amazing. God did not give you a spirit of fear, and you need not to have fear. You need to cultivate a cheerful outlook on life. You need to be thankful, grateful, plug out of whatever is giving you doom and gloom, plug into hope, and be well. We covered some other things, but I'm just really just backtracking. We talked about physical activity. We saw a study that pertained to physical activity, and that was empowering. Now you have power in your hands to do something which is low tech and something which is no cost at all. It doesn't have to cost you anything. Something that now gives you just power to do, and you can now adopt a lifestyle change that gives you a better outcome when it comes to a communicable disease. So don't think that because if something is communicable, that's it. You know, for those who are Christians, we are informed by the Bible, and it says here in Exodus 15:26, if thou wilt diligently hearken to the voice of the Lord to do that which is right in his sight. See, to do, not just to say, Lord, keep me safe, and I won't do any different. I won't do anything. No, many people think that's what Christians do. No, Christians do. The religion of Christ is very practical as much as it is scientific and spiritual. So to do that which is right in his sight and to hearken unto his commands, okay, he will put none of these diseases upon you. And the Bible is a health book as well. It tells you to exercise. It tells you to what you should eat and what you shouldn't eat. And it tells you to sit up late and all these things and damage your body is vain. So if you follow the Bible, you can never go wrong. Okay, that's my personal belief, and I hereby tell it to you, not to force it down your throat, but for you to consider if you're not of that persuasion. Yes, so we saw that exercising will definitely increase your outcomes, and that should be encouraging to you. We saw what happened in Barnstable, Massachusetts, that caused the CDC to drop certain things that they were saying, like stop wearing masks and you can't pass it on if you are vaccinated, to, hey, put on back your mask and you can pass it on and you can still go into a hospital. Basically, there was no difference. The only difference is, the only thing coming out of that was positive is that they say, well, it does appear that it does seem that the vaccine prevents hospitalization. Okay, so then we went through a study called No Point in Vaccinating Those Who Have Had a Previous Infection, coming out of the Cleveland Clinic. That was very informative as well. Then we went through another one that compared SARS-CoV-2 natural to vaccine-mediated immunity. All right, and that was also very informative. We saw from that comparison that there was no difference. Give me a moment. Just 1 second here. Great. And the next study that we saw was where they compared previous protection from the Pfizer vaccine to that of natural immunity. And we saw where natural immunity was actually 27 times better than in its strength, and its durability, and its long-lasting nature than that of the vaccine. Now, why did they reveal these things? Because it informs them about how to continue to do things and how to make policies as well, and how to cure and how to fight against this thing. You can't see something and just turn a blind eye to it. It will actually hurt you. Remember, ignorance isn't bliss, and what you don't know can actually harm you. And after that, we went into another one where we looked at a long-term perspective on immunity to COVID, where we saw that not only did people have an immune reaction, or what we call, they converted, or they made seroconverted from the sickness. Not only that, but they went on to actually transition that into long-term immunity stored in B cells or plasma cells in the bone marrow. Amazing. So what we didn't know, we are now knowing. And from that, governments, policymakers can look and say, hey, we probably should be looking here. 8, we also looked at immunological memory assessed over 8 months, and we saw that it held up and was stable. And we also saw an amazing study that showed that previous T-cell immunity from specific previous T-cell immunity for SARS-CoV-2 was in the blood samples of people from 2018. Amazing. And then finally, we looked at one that showed that scientists have discovered in some individuals super immunity against 23 variants. All right, and as I said to you, I believe that there is even more. So with this being said now, what's the next step? I know that in Jamaica, where the researcher or presenter is from, we see looming mandatory, people calling for mandatory vaccinations and so on. But what it would do well is that the government or those policymakers take into consideration the science. I don't know that they're saying the hospitals are overflowing, all these things, but there are many other things that are going on. There are these studies that are coming out, and many other persons are having a different experience, and that probably needs to be taken into consideration as it pertains to this legal thing that people now want to do. Any policies that are made, you want that policy to be informed by science so that you can be fair to all who are involved. I do believe that it will go on to more than what we're seeing. And check us back again in 3 months. Wow, you'll have much more studies coming out. It's coming out so rapidly. We're learning a lot more, and it will be good to follow the science and not just to hope and to guess at things. Because when you hope and guess at something, once again, ignorant is not bliss. My people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. What you don't know can actually harm you. So it would make sense to go forward with caution, and not just with caution, but also to go forward with information. So that is it from me tonight. It is now 9:04, and I promised you that we would end on time, and I think we have. Once again, if you need these studies, feel free to send me a chat. Okay, I'm seeing some things here in the chat. Someone telling me that it's going to cut off their profits, sir. Well, yes, we know that there are many things to happen if certain things are done, but we have to do what's right. I think governments should do what is right and what the science is showing. All right, so I'm getting some emails there. Remember, send in your email right after this. I will save the chat so I have the emails and I can send these studies on to you so that you can remain informed. Inform your family. The hysteria, the run around, I'm gonna be sick, oh God, I'm gonna die. You know, all these things. Yes, if you call it up on yourself, it will happen. Okay? People need to be informed, and I think information is power, and applied knowledge is power. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't let him drink. Similarly, you can lead a man to knowledge, to facts, to data, but can you make him think is the question. You must know how to sift through information and make decisions based upon that. All right, so I will hang on for a little bit, and then I will close in about 2 minutes. Someone here is looking forward to a follow-up. I am as well, yes. And I hope that you were blessed this evening. So send on your emails in the next 2 minutes, and then I'll close off right after that. If you've done so already, you may log off, or if you choose not to send it, you may log off, and we'll keep in touch. All right, so good night, everybody, from me to you. Have a wonderful night. You're welcome. Okay, I see just a few persons remaining. I'm about to close off, but I see some questions in the chat saying our next episode could talk about what no buy, no sell will look like. That will eventually happen. It will happen. I'm not the bearer of bad news, but that is exactly where it is going. This issue will also play a part in that. And where if you read the tabloids, you're seeing where that is being called for by even our very fellow citizens, for those who have not received. It says, would you say the variants are spread by vaccinated persons or unvaccinated? Well, there is a school of thought that sick persons infect other sick persons. Now, the morbidity, the contagious nature of this virus um, seems like anyone is able to spread it. You pick up a virus on your hand, you put it near your face, you can spread it and not even be infected. And there is this phenomenon of asymptomatic spread, which is being investigated. But that can happen to anyone, all right? So you can spread it, but I want to also inform you about something called endemicity, or when a disease becomes, or a pathogen becomes endemic, it means you live with it. You can't kick it to the curb anymore. So you just say, hey, we're just gonna live with this thing. So how you live with it now is when it becomes endemic. Why am I bringing up that? Because you may come in contact with the coronavirus and it doesn't do you anything. But if you stress yourself, if you allow your immune system to run down, if you're not treating your body well, if you're not resting, you will be sick. And that comes back to the philosophy of medicine, that it is not just about what disease a person has, but what kind of person has a disease. It is you. Who are you? What have you been doing? And so you see that it is not just that you come upon something, but does it make you sick? Okay, so these things are to be considered, and it's good to have a good philosophy on health as you approach these issues, because if you keep your body in health, you may come upon something, but it will not necessarily sick you. It will not make you sick. All right, so I hope that helps to answer the question. So it's spread by anyone, just like any virus is spread by anyone. All right, so have an amazing night. Let me save the chat, and then I will definitely email all these persons. I realize that persons are still here. I thought everyone had logged off. I'm here. I'm here trying to find the save. But in any case, I will screenshot it. But the questions are coming in. And sometimes when everybody else is gone, those who hang around get a little brought up. But I'll be logging off very shortly. But here the questions are being asked. And I guess our next session, whoever invited you tonight, tell them to look out for the next posting that I'll be posting, to do some question and answer, because we see here some questions that are coming in, and I will invite a medical professional to be with me as well, who is of a similar persuasion as myself. I'm a medical professional too, not an MD, but I'll have one with me who will be fielding some of these questions that are here being asked. All right. But just to
answer some of these. People are asking how are we not poisoning our bodies with prolonged use of masks? We were not made to breathe in carbonic acid. Yes, and you answered the question in your question. Yes, we were not made to it. If you should wear a mask, it should be for a short period of time. But what we're seeing now is a long-term use of mask that people are being subjected to. One young lady told me that she reached home and actually was bathing with the mask on her face. She didn't even remember that she had on a mask. People are in their cars driving for hours and still have on a mask. You're not made to do that. Your body, a law of health is fresh, clean air. Breathe deep, long inspirations. All right. So yes, you've answered the question, and we were not made to breathe that way. And you suppress your immune system when you actually do that. And that's just the truth, whether it's a law or not. It's just the truth. It's just the truth. All right. Somebody says, how long is the vaccine effective? CDC Director Walensky said about 6 to 8 months. That's what they say, but let's rest with that for now. All right, let's rest with that because it wanes very quickly, is what they're seeing. But as I'm saying, it's not only that it wanes, but that it becomes outdated because of the new variants. So that creates a new problem of not just it being weakened and need a boost, but it is outdated. Guys have changed and new players are on the field and you're still using the old thing. Well, and that's where the natural immunity stands out in a big way. Someone is asking what organization, institution is this? Well, I'm just a guy. It's a regular guy who, just a regular old Joe. All right, this is not backed by any certain organization. I am a part of organizations, but this one was done by me and my wife, and we just planned this one so that people can get the information. I've been doing this, but they said to whom much is given, much is expected. So hey, we share it. And it's good in sharing. When you share, you're blessed to the more. All right. But any organization that I'm affiliated with, this tonight is not necessarily their opinion. And this is mine. So I hope that tonight blessed you all. And I'm about to take down these emails so that we can be out of here.